Welcome everyone to Hospitality for Hospitality, the podcast that brings the back of the house to the front. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about new versus old school technology. How can you identify unhealthy processes in your property and get rid of them in favor of better ones? Let us begin. To solve this challenge today, I have the perfect guest, Frank Witte. Frank, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Omri. My name is Frank Witte. I'm the Director of Reservations at Trump National Doral Resort here in Doral, Florida. I've had several different positions here at the resort, but my career in hospitality began way back in early 2000s in Costa Rica on the southern Pacific coast at a very small boutique hotel in Dominical, Costa Rica.
Nice. So, without further ado, let's jump into today's challenge, which is inefficiencies in general. How do you find broken processes today in hospitality, um, things that are not working?
It's a good question. I think in being in the industry that we are in, which is hospitality and serving guests, which is the main purpose, any time that you get a complaint from a guest, anytime you get an unsatisfied guest, I think that's a good place to start. If you know that the guest is unsatisfied, you know something isn't going right. So you have to delve into the processes that you're using to satisfy those guests. And if those processes aren't working, then you know something's not going right. So I think the best way to go about that is to look at the processes and figure out if it is actually the process that's broken or the person that's using the process. I think that's step number one, because a lot of times the process might be just fine, but the people who are using it may need training, may not be fit for the position that they're in, whatever it may be. But I think that's where you start is an unsatisfied guest. You know something isn't going right.
So, that's a very good start. Unsatisfied guest. What about the back of the house, the operations side? How do you find inefficiencies over there? Because sometimes they're not directly touching a guest, but there is a lot of revenue leakages. I know from Reeco for sure.
That is true. So I guess in that case you would have to go with the team and get feedback from every member of each team and see exactly get their input as to what could be better, what could be more efficient. And I think you have to lean on team members to really come up with those kind of those answers.
This is very interesting because I find that a lot when I try to talk with either hotelier or even Rico employees and kind of see how they can bring better processes and ideas to the tables. And sometimes they're so deep in the trenches and they can't really see the high level picture. And this is probably when, and we'll talk about it a little bit in the podcast, who is the person in charge of correcting those processes? But yes, I agree with you. Wrong uh, guest or someone complaining about something is a good start, and also collecting some feedback from your people, because sometimes we just think they have no idea what they want, but believe me, chef and housekeeping manager, they know exactly what they need. So following that, why do you think so many hoteliers still kind of struggle with technology or processes and they leave the people to use, let's say, pen and paper? For me it sounds ridiculous, right? For in my home, I would never purchase with pen and paper. I would never do inventory, even though I don't do inventory checks with pen and paper. I would never do reservations even by calling someone. So why do you think in the property it's so common?
So I think it's a matter of comfortability. I think people get used to certain processes, and it's scary. Change is scary. Change can be scary to a lot of people. If something, the old saying is, if it's broken, don't if it's not broken, don't fix it. Right. So and people get used to, if something's working well enough, then leave it alone. But we can always improve on processes. We can always improve with new technology, and I've come across that several times in my career. Starting in Costa Rica, that hotel that I was at used pen and paper for reservations, telephone calls, pen and paper. While I was there, we just happened to get into reservations by email. I mean, this is back in the day, right? So, and now they're with Booking.com, and they're with the OTAs, and they're with all kinds of third parties booking for them and receiving reservations automatically. So that's just one example, but I think the answer is comfortability. This is an old industry, a very old industry, and it's sometimes it's hard to take processes that have been around a very long time and get it into everyone's head that this could be a lot easier if you just give it a chance.
So, for our listeners, if you remember with the episode I did with Ira Volk about bringing new technology, we actually tackled this angle of how can you kind of make sure that hoteliers embrace new technology. But today with Frank, I actually want to show you guys how can we get rid of bad habits and bad technology and not necessarily replace it with a new one, maybe with a process or something. But before we come up with some real practical examples, who should be responsible for replacing the technologies? Let's say back of the house, front of the house. It feels like in the hotel, everyone is, or the GM is doing lots of many things. And is there a person that his job is to replace those wrong processes or inefficiencies, or it falls under the department heads? Who should be blamed for the wrong processes?
Well, to answer the question, and not to point any fingers, but yes, every director is responsible for their own department. Now, implementing those new process or finding new technology, if that's what we're talking about, I think the idea of necessity should be presented by whoever has the necessity, which would probably be the director of the department. Um, but that idea has to be presented to someone who can facilitate the change or find the new technology, which in most cases is going to be a director of IT. If I come up with an idea, me knowing nothing about, uh, let's say, just for example, booking pool cabanas, let's say, for an example. If I don't know it, if I am the director of pool and recreation and I have a process to book my pool cabanas, and that's through phone calls or word of mouth, whatever it might be, and I need something more efficient. I know that there's opportunity to book more cabanas. I know there's opportunity to increase revenue, and but I don't know what's out there. I would say it's my responsibility to do some research and maybe bring an idea or two to my director of IT and say, hey, look, I see that this is possible over here, but I don't know how to implement it. So yeah, I mean, there are certain people in luckily in the hotel that are able to help me on that road to get my department on a with a better outlook.
But there is no time, right? This is the biggest excuse. I have no time. I only have 12 hours working a day. How do you want me to find new technology? How do you want me to go on conferences and find those technologies? How do you want me to research over the internet and actually find that I'm so busy putting out fires all day long? So,
And they are.
how can you do that? I mean, at the end of the day, we're in a business where we need to serve guests and stay profitable. And during that process, it's really hard to find good and improved technologies. And even when the vendors come to your door, sometimes you tell them, hey, you know what, it's not a good time right now. Our food and beverage guy just left. Our housekeeping just left. So how do you actually assign that job? Maybe it's a new role. Maybe it's a new position that we need to hire and we're just figuring it out right now together. But don't you think as as a GM or someone who is in charge of revenue and creating more kind of revenue to the property, wouldn't you think that putting it on the directors is just a little bit too much of expectations from them to actually turn a process to more efficient?
I don't disagree with you at all. And if you if like you said, at this moment we're talking about it in a position uh, of for strictly to do that, to go out and look for new ways to create revenue and new ways to improve processes. That, gosh, uh, that would make a huge difference to a lot of executive management in the industry, because it falls on everyone, to be honest. And the person who's going to benefit from it most is usually the person who's working hardest to get it. So if my department is struggling in a certain area, and it's reflecting poorly on me, then I'm going to be the one that's going to put in the most work to try to improve that. Right? That's kind of common sense. Um, but uh, but in the end, there's one person that's going to make that decision.
Yeah.
Right? It goes up and up and up and up, and everybody becomes. We've talked about this in the past, but um, everybody becomes a salesman at some point, right? If you want something, if you need something, then you have to sell it to the person that you need the approval from, which is going to be either the person above you or the person above them, whoever it might be. Ultimately, it's going to be the managing director of the hotel. So uh, until we have that position that we're talking about, that maybe we found today, until we have that, ultimately the responsibility falls on whoever needs it the most.
So maybe that's the tip of the day, to find some more resources for research.
There we go.
Definitely will be more helpful. So let's say we found the person who is in charge and they found some inefficiencies. Where do you see most inefficiencies today, just for the listeners who kind of focus in their properties? Do you find it mostly in the front of the house, in the back of the house, specific areas, let's say the kitchen, engineering? Where do you see most inefficiencies today? You mentioned cabana, sorry. So maybe outside the pool.
Right. I would say the areas that are guest facing are perhaps not the most efficient, but the most process oriented, and they have, as they say, their ducks in a row, because they're always on stage. So in a restaurant, it takes a lot of training for a server to be a depending on the outlet, let's say, but it does take a certain amount of training for that server to be acceptable to be serving tables in and be guest facing. A front desk agent, again, same thing, takes a lot of training. You need to know the verbiage. You need to know um, the processes about checking someone in, checking them out, going through guest folios, and everything that is required to be in front of the guest. So I would say that those areas are the most efficient with their processes. Back of house, it's not as important to have everything lined up because you're not in front of the guest. So in my experience, I would say back of house has um, maybe more inefficiencies with their processes, but I can't say that they don't get the job done, because back of house, they do a lot of work that no one sees, and they do it very well
I
in
think
most
that's
cases. Yeah.
that's the biggest difficulty, because as you said, for years and years, vendors and properties invested so much in the front of the house just to make sure that the guests will be happy. They put lots of AI and great stuff and screens, and you do your self-check-in and important things for sure, but they forgot a little bit about the back of the house, about the people who work very hard to pull this show and make sure that the property actually looks nice and clean, and
That's
that the
right.
guests will actually return. Because self-checking, yeah, it's a cool one-time thing. Sorry for the vendors out there who are doing that, but at the end of the day, you have those long processes of, for example, what we do at Reeco, purchasing and inventory and recipe, things that the guest has no idea that take place in the property,
Right.
but those are the same
It's
as
what
we
makes the
see are.
machine run. It's what
Exactly.
makes the machine run. Right.
Exactly. I
Right.
agree. So you mentioned a little bit about the cabanas. Can
Hmm.
you share some real life examples of you figuring out or finding broken processes in your property and how you tackle them? And if you can share some numbers on the improvements that you've made.
Sure. So at one point, as I mentioned before, I've held several positions here. At one point, I was the director of pool and recreation here at the resort, and we were looking for a way to make cabana booking. This was a real example I was giving. We were looking for a way to get cabana booking to be more efficient and easier for the guest. Was really that's what makes it more efficient. If it's easier for the guests, they're going to book more. That creates more revenue. Everyone wins. So we made an attempt to hire an outside company to handle our cabana bookings, along with other um, amenities. Let's say so, in-room amenities, whether wine, charcuterie boards, whatever it might be. And we hired them to do this. They had their own platform. They had their own platform, and they were unable to link that platform with the hotel website. So it was a separate platform on the website. We were able to put a link to their website. Then they could go and book the cabana. It just never caught on, and I think that it was the disconnect between it was forcing a guest to make a room reservation here and then go over here to make their cabana reservation, and it just wasn't working at all. And we went through this for a few years trying to make this work. And not only was there a monthly fee, but there was also a percentage on each booking that we paid out. Wasn't uh, producing a lot of revenue, to be honest. And so at at a certain point, we decided this isn't working. Let's try to improve. Let's go a different direction, and maybe what we should have done from the beginning, and let's try to improve our own process and try to get these amenities available and these other add-on amenities on our own website. And we were able to do that. We were able to work with our corporate team and get this um, get it ready to go and get it out to the guests and immediately. I mean, this is in-room amenities, late checkout fees, anything that we could produce extra revenue with, and we got this out to the guests, and immediately we saw triple the revenue that we were seeing before easily. That's probably actually lowballing, but at least triple the revenue. And to this moment, I mean, we're seeing it's like night and day. So that told us that it's not always necessary um, to purchase something to improve things. You can work on what you have and improve on what you have to create something better.
Nice. So it's not only about getting rid of technology in favor of a new one, it's about getting rid of technology and maybe finding a cheaper alternative, a simpler process to solve that.
Correct.
Now, how did you find about this inefficiency? Was it through a guest telling you, hey, your system is not working? Or was it collecting feedback from your people telling you, if there is a place that you should look at, this will be the case?
So remember, I said a few minutes ago, when you have to listen, sometimes you have to listen to your team, and we started listening to our servers, who they obviously they collect tips and gratuities from the people who are renting the cabanas, and they were telling us that ever since we implemented this new process, that they were actually making less money than they were beforehand when we had no process in place. Um, so we started listening. We started listening to that and taking that into consideration, and then going back and analyzing the numbers and considering how much. was going out as opposed to what was coming in. And once we had all that information together, it was a pretty easy decision to try to look a different direction.
So it came from the employees. Do you guys actually do like in the tech world where we do daily stand-up meetings where we meet for 15
Absolutely.
minutes and you hear them out? You do that as
Absolutely.
well? Okay, that's
Absolutely.
great.
Yes, absolutely. Every day. Here at this specific hotel, it's called a Trump talk.
Trump talk.
Yeah,
Nice.
Trump talk every day.
So that's probably the best way to kind of find out. So after you find out that you found the inefficiency, how were you able to free up some of the time to actually tackle that? I know it was probably postponed for days, weeks, months, but
Sure, sure. And it again, we this was run up the flagpole, and luckily we have a very hands-on general manager, and she was able to um, make that connection with our corporate team to get the ball rolling on getting that set up on our own website. Now, separating from the other company, that's another story, and that was definitely something that she took care of. So we didn't have to, we didn't really have to do much with that. So in this case, we got the idea, and we got it to the right person, and she ran with it, and we were able to get it done.
so this case was actually simple because it came from the employees. But in other occasions where you try to bring in new technology, let's say in favor of the old one, you
Mm-hmm.
always have this tough cookie saying, another technology that management is trying to push us. You said before that you need to sell to your people. How do you do that? How do you convince people who have been doing the same thing for 5, 10, even 20 years to change and embrace new process or technology?
Examples are a great way to do that. In the end, money talks, as we all know. So if if you can come up with a way to either save money or create more money, um, people will listen as long as you have valid examples, and you can present it in a way to get their attention. And again, and I hate to say this again, but at some point we all become salespeople, and if you want to grab someone's attention, you need to have a good reason for them to pay attention. So if you can find a good product, if you have a good product, if you have even a good reason to look for a new product, that usually will get someone's attention if they're paying the bills.
And that's probably gonna work for the general managers who wants to see the bottom line improved. But how about the chef or the housekeeping manager, the one that actually needs to use or embrace that process? How do you tell them, hey, so from now on, forget what you've been doing for the last 10 years. We're changing it. We're gonna start with something new. How do you sell that?
So every, I think number one, you have to know the operation. You have to know what they go through on a daily basis, know the challenges that they face, and if you don't know that, then you should do a little studying
Yeah.
and spend a little time with them. Get to know exactly what it is that they face on a daily basis, and feed into that. So if, let's say, a chef is chefs work night and day, and they work many hours, and they work very hard, and a lot of that time is done taking inventory and seeing what it is that they need to order for the next, maybe the next week, but a lot of times the next day, because they're short on something that they're going to need for a special or whatever it might be. Um, when you understand the challenges that they go through, then you can sell it to them through that. Listen, you have this challenge. You need this by tomorrow. You have to take an hour out of your day, and an hour is very valuable to you. If you could do that in 10 minutes, I mean, imagine the difference it would make in your day. You might get home to your wife an hour earlier. You might be able, you could see your kids for an hour more that day. You might produce a three more specials on top of the two that you were planning on putting out anyways, and increase your sales for that day. Whatever it might be, whatever that reason is, whatever the challenge that they face, you use that challenge to sell them the new process. It's not easy. No one likes change. Maybe not no one, but most people don't like change. People who have been doing, like you said, people who have been doing the same thing for 10 or 20 years, it's difficult to change. But if you can sell them on the fact that it's going to make their lives easier, that's a good way to go about it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. So, just a short recap of what we talked today, because I think a lot being said, and there are great tips kind of to help the people improve processes or get rid of new or old school technologies or processes in their property. So, the first people should be focused on that are the directors or the head of the departments. They should be looking for guest feedback or feedback from their employees because they know the best what's they've been going through. um, Hotels should really invest some resources in research. uh, Even though everyone is packed with their time, they need to really kind of make sure that they see the high level picture. And even if the process will take months, it's better to put it on the table and make sure someone is taking care of that, and know the operation, understand the pain. That's probably the best way if you want to make a
Right.
change or sell the change to your employees. Anything else you can think of from your side, something that I missed?
Um, I would say just to always be on the lookout for something better. You always have to be on the lookout for something better because there usually is something better. And um, we're talking about making other people's lives easier, but in the end, their lives are easier, then our lives are easier. And I think that's the end game. Is we'd like better we'd like to better our lives.
I agree. Especially right now, I think we're in a very special time in life. 2024, AI, lots of crazy things are going on in different industries. And I think it's time for hospitality to kind of let and embrace new processes into their life because it will just makes everyone's lives much easier. So I really think this is the time to do that. So before we say goodbye, what are you planning for us in 2024?
2024, big
Which is funny.
gains.
It's already like the middle
We're
of
in the
the
middle.
year.
We're in the middle of 24.
Almost starting 2025. But yes,
Right.
for the rest of the year, what's in your
Right.
mind?
To top off 2024 is it's all about big gains. It's all about pushing for pushing for more and serving as efficiently as we can these guests um, that we serve on a daily basis, building the loyalty and getting them to become return guests over and over and over again. And that's really what we're pushing for, and that's what we're doing here at least.
So I think
It's
that
really
the
a
key
focus.
here is efficiency, as you said. Efficiency will make everyone's life better, including our guests.
Including our guests.
Nice.
That's right.
Frank, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And I really hope to see you soon in the future. And good luck with solving all those inefficiencies.
Thank you, Omri. It was a pleasure being on. Thank you so much for the invite, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you.